Hello, everybody out there in UK Bookland. I'm here with Amanda Jennings to talk about her latest book, The Storm. If you could tell us a little bit about the plot, please, Amanda.
Yes, absolutely. I've actually got a copy of it here. So that's the, oh dear, let me get on the right thing. So that's the front cover. The Storm is a story that opens with Hannah, who is in a horrendous marriage to Nathan, who's a very clean cut solicitor. They live down in Cornwall, in Newlyn, just outside Newlyn, which is near Penzance, and he's a very well respected member of the local community. Does a lot of charity work. He's a sort of upstanding, very handsome. So all the ladies in the library who come to his talks think he's gorgeous. But behind closed doors, we've got this situation where the marriage is definitely not as it seems. So Hannah is sort of stuck in this very claustrophobic, coercive, controlled relationship where she doesn't have any agency at all. She has her receipts gone through with a fine tooth comb. She doesn't have a driver's license or a credit card. She makes no decisions really at all. He even tells her what to wear on a daily basis. And at the beginning of the story, she lives in a beautiful manor house, not a manor house, but a large beautiful Cornish manor farmhouse style houses, and with her son Alex, who's about 15. And at the beginning, you don't quite understand why she's putting up with. It seems that she's got a bit of spirit about her. But also you have no idea why anyone would stay in this marriage and what on earth she's done. And the rest of the story told in flashbacks throughout with a sort of dual timeline, you find out what it is that has caused in her past, that has caused her to accept this marriage, as she calls it, her prison, her rightful prison. And we have the dual storyline, which is set in the fishing community of Newlyn, where after a very traumatic fishing accident, of which the Storm relates, some horrendous event happens one night that basically affects the whole of Hannah and her then young, delightful lover, Cameron Stewart, who is a very handsome fisherman. It affects their life.
What made you decide to go for the coercive control, with this being your fourth book? Because it's a pretty on-trend topic.
Yeah, I think it's funny about trends. I think sometimes you don't necessarily pick a trend because it's trending. You pick a trend for whatever reasons the other or filmmakers or television makers to pick that subject as well. So I had the first idea for The Storm 2.5 years ago, and lo and behold, when it's published 6 months ago, suddenly there are lots of other stories that are coming out that have a similar theme. I have no idea whether it was a sort of influence by the Me Too movement or by there was a change in the law where that affected domestic abuse, non-physical domestic abuse, emotional control. So it's possible that it's there sort of, in the back of all of our minds, percolating away, and the stories come. But I knew that I wanted to. I love writing about your crime or your traumatic event that happens in the past that has been long buried, and then you see into the future 15, 20, 25 years, depending on which book of mine you're reading, to see how those people are coping following the event. And then there is always a sort of instigating situation. For example, in The Storm, you have a surprise visitor from the past and it ignites it all again. So what has been calm and maybe under control in some way is ignited. So coercive control came because I wanted this love triangle, and it seemed an interesting way to sort of see her trauma of being kept prisoner when she didn't want to be.
How much research did you do when decided on the topic?
I researched quite a lot. I'm a massive. I take quite a long time to write a book, so it's probably about between 18 months to 20 months to write a book, and most of that, Alex, is notebooks and just. I write a first draft quite quickly. I write that in about 3 months, and I spend probably I don't know, a good 8 or 9 months just reading articles and talking to people, looking at video, not necessarily writing all that down, but just sort of letting it come into me a bit like a sponge. And then I have these notebooks. I'm just going to go, my desk is very messy, so you can't see it, but I will grab. So then I get about every book I buy myself a really pretty notebook. It's become a sort of tradition of mine. And then I just fill it with all my, this is the one I'm currently writing, with all my notes. So I do a lot of research, but I don't do it in a very academic way. I do it in a much more sort of, you know, little things that I find, and, you know, Googling and little articles that I find, and I sort of, I suppose it all goes in, as I said, goes into this big sponge in my brain.
Well, I suppose that way it doesn't kind of get in the way of the plot, does it? That way, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And then when I'm writing, you'll have all over my first draft, there'll be big asterisks saying, you have no idea what you're talking about here, please research this. And then I'll sort of go back, research it in retrospect as well, which is good.
When it came to your previous book, though, that was also in Cornwall. So why is Cornwall so important for you?
So I've had my last 3 books, In Her Wake and The Cliff House and the Storm, have all been set in Cornwall. And my mum is Cornish, and I would like to be Cornish. I'm not. My dad is from Pinner, and I was born in Wimbledon, so I have no glamour at all. But I just, the first book I ever wrote was set in Cornwall, and I didn't even think twice. I just wanted to set it in Cornwall. There's something about the sea and the cliffs and the legends. The first book that I wrote, which then became my third, which is In Her Wake, I didn't get a deal for it first time round, so I shoved it under the bed to get dusty, and then I wheeled it out again after my first 2 books were published. That was, I knew very early on, even when I was writing my first debut, that was to do with mermaids. It's a complicated link, but there's mermaids in it, which obviously put it into the sea. And then where do I know best? Well, I know Cornwall, and it just sort of came from there, really. And then when In Her Wake did quite well, it was sort of the first book of mine to get a little bit of visibility. It was a W.H. Smith pick, and that obviously got it a lot of visibility. My next deal, when we spoke to the editor, she said, well, how about you sort of set your books in Cornwall? So it sort of came from that, really. It was just, I set the precedent within Her Wake, and we've carried on. But I was, you know, so my 4th book is also in Cornwall. I'm writing that now, but not near the sea. I'm feeling really excited. I've set it on Bodmin Moor, and I haven't got any salt in the air, and there's no seagulls, and I'm very excited to do that. So I've got wild ponies and circling buzzards at the moment, and I'm loving it, really loving it.
Bodmin Moor will give you a lot of options with places to hide a body. Is that a really good bit of research that you might?
Yeah. I've done a lot of. You're right, and obviously this is a UK crime club, so my books aren't like true crime. They're not procedural, but they're always a little bit dark, and there's some quite twisted imagery in most of my books. So yeah, you're right. It's not going to be a spoiler to say that very early on in this book we find a body right at the bottom of a lake on Bodmin Moor. So you are right. It was down there. I did think it could be a mine shaft, it could be underneath a pile of granite, but no, it's gone in a lake.
Cool, that sounds very different. Why Bodmin Moor? Is that because it was more rural, or is it just different?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So, I mean, this is the first time I've spoken about this book. I don't normally, because it's really in its early stages. I haven't even finished the first draft, and the first draft is due in a couple of weeks, actually. So this is all a little bit exclusive, and people might listen to me now and then read the book in a year's time or 2 years' time and go, this is nothing like she said. But why Bodmin Moor? Like I said, I wanted a break from the sea. I will go back to the sea, I think, for the one following this one. I've got notions about Tintagel. I love that North Cornish coast as well. So I'm going to try and set that on this. But this one I wanted different. I wanted that sort of, you know, somewhere like Bodmin Moor has a huge amount of atmosphere without even having to. And I've set it in the winter as well, so we've got everything that you would want on Bodmin Moor. We've got mists, and we've got, you know, sort of shadows and ghost references and bits and pieces like that. So, and actually, I went for my darling best friend, unfortunately, sadly, lost her husband last year, and he was very, very poorly. And we went for a break, the two of us, just to give her some space from nursing him, just a night away. And we met on Bodmin Moor, and we went for this amazing walk at the end of October, exactly as you'd want it. Beautiful sky, sunshine, sheep and ponies, and we packed a picnic and went all the way to the top of Row Tor, which is where I'm writing about at the moment. And I think because it was an emotional time for both of us, with what she was going through, it was just one of those moments in time that really struck with me, and I just almost fell in love with it, because normally we go down to St Ives, that's where my family's from, Penzance and St Ives. So normally you just race through Bodmin Moor, gosh, we've only got an hour and a quarter to go, that's brilliant, we're nearly there. And actually stopping there and taking that new area of Cornwall, which is a county I adore more than any other place in the world, and seeing a new area, and also having the emotion of being with my friend when she was going through what she was going through, it's sort of a no-brainer for me, really. Plus, we stayed at Jamaica Inn in apparently Susie Holiday. I don't know if everyone knows lovely author Susie Holiday was sort of wrote, but it's haunted. Can't stay there. So I was really excited to go and try and find some ghosts, but I didn't find any.
Haunted places could give you more ideas. Have you ever thought about writing a horror?
Yes, I have. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's in my future. At some stage, it is in my future. I grew up like lots of crime writers and crime readers. My books that I fell in love with, while other people were reading Judy Blume and Julie Cooper, it was all about James Herbert and Stephen King, and that was my crack. Really, I love nothing more than scaring myself silly with horror, and it's something that I think. It's difficult now, because I think when I was writing 10 years ago, or when I sort of started to publish, I don't know whether this is true or whether it was just something that someone told me, but there was like the thirst for horror had sort of died off, and it was all about the psychological thriller and the procedural crime. So I sort of didn't really give it much more consideration, which is a shame, because I think deep down there's a very, very, very twisted writer in me, which would love to get out and have carte blanche to do some really horrible things.
Well, horror seems to be merging with crime. Well, so you might have decided to do that at the right time.
Yeah, I think so.
Going back to when you started, though, I mean, starting as an architecture student, but you didn't think writing was going to be the first option.
Not at all, no. I was one of those children. So again, for anyone, I don't know what age computers and word processors really kicked in, but I'm of I'm in my late 40s, and I'm of the school where we used to hand essays in, and if you didn't know how to spell and you were a bit shoddy around your grammar, your essays just came back with covered in red marks, and sort of I used to get comments like great ideas and loving what you're doing, great imagery, and really good, lovely things that I would die for. And as an Amazon review now, I'd be like, give it to me. But you need to do these 10 spellings, write them out 3 times. So I just felt that I wasn't very good at English. I did pretty well in my exams. I'm a bit of a girly swot, so I did work hard and I did pretty well in my exams, but I didn't really think that English was my thing. So at A level, I did everything that didn't involve essays. I did geography, maths, art, and French, and left essay writing behind totally. Went to Cambridge and did architecture, and was a dreadful architect, awful architect. All my houses, all my peers had these amazing houses with sort of sweeping curved roofs and amazing design features, and all mine sort of literally were square with 4 windows, a door, and curly smoke coming out of the chimney. It was a dreadful architect. So I luckily went at Cambridge. It's very easy. They split the degree into halves. So I just swapped for my second half to try and get actually past it, I think. And the building was in the same department as the history of art department. I'd always loved art. Again, I would have been an artist if I was any good, but wasn't quite talented enough to be an artist. So I swapped to history of art, and I had the most amazing 2 years. I learned about paintings and sculpture, and I learned to write an essay, and I realized that I loved writing essays, and I did a dissertation. It was 30,000 words. I left it to the last minute, as always, because that's my way. And I wrote it, and I sat down and I wrote it in a week, and I got a first for it, and I got a third for all my other exams. So it sort of led me to believe that, I got a 2-2 overall. But if it hadn't been for what was ostensibly a short book, I don't think I'd even have passed, Alex. So I just fell in love with writing then, really. But again, I didn't really think anything of it. I was one of those people that just sort of got up in the middle of the night if I couldn't sleep and wrote a poem or wrote a piece of prose. And it was only when I had my first baby at sort of 24, 25, that I sort of felt, well, I love the baby and I want to be at home looking after her. So I gave up my job in television at the BBC to be at home with my child. But then I was like, oh my God, look at all the other stuff that goes with looking after a baby, laundry and stuff. So I sort of started writing to avoid housework. I mean, that's essentially.
Fair enough. Yeah. Sounds like a good idea. I just started reading to avoid boredom, and now I'm reading 4 books a week. So yeah,
wow.
it's crazy, isn't it? What you'll do to avoid doing nothing. What do you think you learned as a researcher for the BBC then? Do you think you've managed to take any skills from that into the writing?
That's a very good question, Alex. I don't think in all my years of being interviewed about things, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. I wasn't, in all honesty, I wasn't a researcher for very long. I was a researcher for a year, and then I did one job as an assistant producer. I wasn't, so it wasn't something that it was much more, I was in my early 20s, I'd had a baby, so my focus was on being a mum and stuff. But it's a very interesting question, because I think you're probably right. I think I was a development researcher, which meant I trawled the internet and books and newspapers for stories. So maybe those skills that I learned there, and you present your idea to the producers and directors, and they're sort of like, no, oh, it's got potential, no. So it's possible that maybe that time I spent in those early days was a good, testing ground for finding a story that attracted people. Who knows? That would be it would be really lovely to think that was a skill that I learned from there. So yeah, I'm going to say yes, I probably did.
What do you think you could advise people, given that your third book was actually your first one, about when to pull it out again?
Yeah, so well, two parts to that question. I always say to anyone who's wanting to write, your most important thing is to get that first draft down. I mean, I won't be the only writer who has said that advice. It's the most important thing you can do, is don't sort of over edit the first 3 chapters and send those or chapters off to submission, and then you haven't written a book. Make sure you've got your book written, and don't be in a hurry. I'm a massive editor. I know there are people who aren't, but I believe that you get your first draft down, and then I will rewrite 10 to 12 drafts of each book, and each time you just sort of pick up the stuff that you like and develop that, and drop back the stuff that you don't like. It just gives you time to sit with the book and really work out the story. So my first advice is to finish the book. And then when do you bring it out again? That's a really good question, because I think my book came out as almost a sort of desperate cry that I didn't have to repeat the experience that was my second book. My second book, as everybody or many people will also tell you, it was a real tricky thing to pull off. I had enjoyed writing. It was called The Merry Maid and I. It became In Her Wake. So I loved writing that. It was a joyous thing. I didn't think anything about publicizing. I just wanted to write and have something to do alongside bringing up my baby. When I finished it, I did send it off to agents, and we got a couple of bites of people who were interested, and one agent signed me up. Didn't sell it, so I wrote another one. Didn't even think to go back to that debut, didn't even think to look at it for the second book. We just went straight on. I wrote the second book, I wrote the Judas Scar, and it was really hard work. It was not fun. There were deadlines people were expecting of me. You start to hear the voices of people reviewing your books, and that's a new thing. So I didn't really even consider that people would actually read the book. And then to have everybody's opinions, and they're all different, and so everything just plays on your mind with book 2. You want it to be more of a success, or will it get the same international book deals? In answer to both of those questions, no and no. It was not as successful as my first book. So when I came to the third book, I just sort of was sitting there thinking, do I have the energy to write again? I was feeling a bit down in the dumps. It hadn't gone well with the second book. And so I went back to it. And you know, when you just, I'm not a massive sort of cheerleader of my own work, but there was just something in it that I loved, because it had been my first book, so it had all the passion of a first book. And I just thought there's too much there really to leave behind. So I'd written the 2 books, Sworn Secret and the Judas Scar, and I took what I'd learnt from that and set about rewriting In Her Wake. And that, yeah, I think it was so in terms of sort of when do you bring them out, I wouldn't say there's a specific time to bring them out, but I would say keep them under the bed, because they will get used and nothing is ever wasted. So, you know, if you love it, it's there, and keep it under the bed.
Well, I definitely advise that, because that's what I'm doing with my short stories as well. So never chuck anything away, everybody. It always works out well.
Never.
When we were earlier this week, we were on William Shaw's reading party. What was that like, reading somebody else's work?
Oh my gosh, I loved it. I'm a big fan of Callie Taylor anyway, CL Taylor anyway. I was lucky enough to get Strangers as an ARC, so I read that early anyway. And then, yeah, so normally, tell us a couple of, I don't know when it was, the beginning of lockdown, I did an online event. I think it was Noir at the Bar, and I was reading from my own book. And I don't know if you know the setup there, but 12 people read. I had my Fitbit on, you know, like the Fitbit that counts your steps and your heartbeat and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was waiting for my turn, and they called my name, and I happened to glance down. My heart was going like this, bearing in mind this is my 5th book. I mean, I'm not like a newbie, but anyway, I was glancing down at my Fitbit, and my heartbeat was 130 beats a minute. I was practically dead. I thought it was a really novel way of enjoying a book. It was lovely to have Callie there as well. I thought that was a real bonus to have her there. And reading her own work as well, but then everybody chipping in. So I thought it worked really well, and it would definitely be something that I would love to do with my book. I'm going to tap Will up when my next book comes out and see if I can get myself a slot there. But yeah, I thought it worked really well. Yeah.
Yeah, because there was 16 of us in the end, and it was we ended up reading two parts, and it's a very different way of doing things, I think.
Yeah.
That will probably be a new way of doing online book launches.
Yeah, and actually, Alex, one other thing which I thought was really interesting about it was hearing everybody's different voices. As an author, you get a much more real experience of of trying to comprehend that other people read work. So when you read, normally you read it in your voice, which sounds very like the voice in your head, obviously, when you're actually writing it. But to hear other people reading it out loud was lovely. I've listened to a couple of snippets of my own books on audio, and I can't actually handle it. I actually have to turn off. So it just feels all too there. But for some reason that format sounded lovely. So maybe it was because it wasn't my own work. I think it was probably that.
A lot of authors do struggle with audio, but the Storm was very different because you got 3 different narrators, and I thought that really worked really well because of the way it kind of structured things. When you're writing the book, why did you decide to have different narrators for each chapter? Because I think that's a really unique way of doing things that not a lot of authors are doing at the moment.
No, I've done it. I'm trying to think. I don't want to say 5 books. I should know this, shouldn't I? But I think I've done it in every single book. In fact, I have. All of my books will tell the same story from different points of view. Now, my reasoning of doing that, apart from I have quite a short attention span, so for writing it's quite nice to not be in the same voice for 90,000 words or 100,000 words. So for me it just means that if I'm not feeling like Hannah's voice, for example, in The Storm, I can switch in and have a bit of Nathan to spice things up, or I can come to Cam in the fishing. So it just gives me a little bit of variety when I'm writing. But I'm really fascinated by the idea that if you, so even if we asked people watching this interview now, or we asked you to write an account of it and me to write an account of it, it would be really different. It would be different about what I've noticed, what I picked up on, my favourite question. You would be able to write about the bits where you thought I was droning on too much, or whether it was acceptable, or the bits and pieces. And we would all have very different viewpoints of something. So if you go and then take something traumatic, especially when you've got people who might be to blame or blaming, the stories become very different. And I think it actually genuinely fascinates me. It's not so much an unreliable narrator. It's like, oh, well, that information, actually, I can now see it from their point of view. And therefore it makes, in my view anyway, it makes the story a little bit more rich and developed. So yeah, I don't think I would ever not do it, actually. Although, I don't know, obviously.
With that approach, does it lead better to being a planner or a pantser?
I am a pantser. Horrendous. It's awful, which I think is probably why I like them I like my stories split into those 3 parts, or it's generally 3. I don't plan. I don't. Occasionally I'll do a chapter outline. So I've just done a chapter outline, but I'm at 90,000 words of the new one, so I've gone back and just sort of sorted it out now and taken a breath. It's a terrifying way to write, and I don't know why I do it. I've tried planning. I have tried planning, and I can't do that either. I just get bored. I just sort of it's a sort of, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. And I think when I'm in the zone, you'll hear some writers talking probably very very pretentiously about being zoned. Quickly you get little nuggets of things that if I'd planned it I might miss, and I like surprising myself, and I like sort of getting to know my characters so much that actually I've just today, for example, written a scene where 2 of my characters go for a walk on the moor. I know them really well now. I've been with them for a year in notebook stage and then first draft stage. So I've sort of sent them onto the moor. I didn't really have much idea of what was happening and what they were going to do. And they just did their stuff. And it's actually, if I'd planned it, I feel that maybe that sort of vibrancy might go. But that's just from my point of view. Other people would get terrified thinking they would pants. But like I said, pantsing for me, and I know lots of my other friends who are pantsers, there's a lot of editing that goes afterwards. So I sort of now think that actually I am a planner. I just plan in a 90,000 word first draft, and that's my plan. And then I go back and rewrite it.
Yeah. It's a really interesting thing, because when I'm doing it, because I dictate this stuff, I can't plan anything because it's crazy, because I don't know what's going to come out in that, and because I'm dictating it to someone else, it'll change before it gets to the page. So it's a nightmare. So planning is a no-go area.
Yeah. I mean, I've got author friends. I'm sure you have as well. I've got author friends who one of my friends has 1,500 post-it notes stuck to her wall with every single scene and timeline and all sorts of things. But my post-its, I wouldn't stick them on properly and they'd all fall off on the floor and then I'd be chaos. So I think you have to stick to your strengths, and mine's probably just cracking on white page and going for it.
I think my biggest problem is I didn't know what my strengths were. When did you find out when the technique would work for you?
In terms of whether I was planner or pantser?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I started writing my book before Twitter, before Facebook, really. I didn't really have any other touch points for what other people, I didn't know any authors. I had toyed with the idea of doing a writing group and then sort of decided I didn't want to do it that way either. So I didn't really, to be absolutely fair, know any other way other than just to sit down and write the book. And so I think that's probably, actually, the writer that I am today is probably an evolution of the writer that I started out being. I had a baby, so I wrote in very small chunks of time. So even now I only have concentration spans for 20 minutes, and then I have to sort of look away, and which is why you'll see me even on a first draft flicking between. You'll be like, you're supposed to be on a first draft, how come you've just sent a tweet out? And it's because I'm just flicking backwards and forwards. So I don't think I set out to be a planner or a pantser. I think it just happened. Probably. Yeah.
With it being, I just finished reading your previous one, To the Storm, and that was what I would call I'm trying to think of what the term is when someone's like a school thing, like a coming of age book.
Yes, it's coming of it. Yeah. So
yeah.
It's like a young adult, isn't it? But
yeah,
I think Cliff House is probably more young adult than The Storm. They're not sold as young adult, but funnily enough, one of the nicest reviews I ever had was for the Cliff House. And take this with a pinch of salt because it's from a 5-star review, so she obviously liked the book, but she just said, I think this is going to be a YA classic of the future. It's not, I'm just telling you that now, it's not, but she definitely responded to that from a YA angle, and she hadn't picked it up being YA, but I think because it's got one of the points of view, no, it was Angie. Sorry, I wrote that 2 years ago. So I'm just trying to think. But 2 of the points of view are for teenagers. So as soon as you've got a teenage point of view in there, it has YA, connotations, and even though it's not set out to be that way.
We've got an opportunity to give books out to the audience. Yes. Today, so we've got some audience questions alongside.
Now I can't see them. I see Samantha, so I've got a copy of The Storm, and I've got a copy of In Her Wake. Sorry, I think I'm in mirror writing, and then I've got a copy of The Cliff House with its lovely little gold. I can only see on my chat. I can only see Samantha Brownlee's questions, so I might need some help telling what questions.
Sam's got. If you could, if you just deal with that, and I'll get Sam to come up. Sam will type the questions for you, and I'll come up alongside.
Brilliant.
Did you see that one from Sam that popped up?
Yes.
Hi. Can you see the questions that are on the right-hand side?
One's from you, and then I can also see Facebook user. So have you visited your locations, and how long does it take to write your draft? Yeah?
I can send you the names for those afterwards.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so shall I ignore yours, Samantha, and go with the Facebook user ones?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So, Where are we? So we've got the first one I can see here is, have you visited your locations on many occasions? So the answer to that is yes, with a caveat for the one I'm writing now. So my grandmother lived all her life, nearly 100 years, in Penzance. And I spent summers and Christmases there for as long as I can remember. So if I take In Her Wake, which is set in Zena and St Ives, my parents have a house in St Ives, and in Zena, sorry, and St Ives is where we hang out now. The beaches that I put in all of the books. So this, the Cliff House is set near Sennen, which is my father's favourite beach. That's where we used to spend all our time as children, surfing. And actually there's a scene where there's an accident in the water where a little boy is tumbled in the waves, and that is pretty much from personal experience, where I went under and tumbled in the waves and honestly thought I was dying. So that's one from my own personal experience. And then The Storm is set in Newlyn and Penzance. I know Penzance very well, and Newlyn to a certain extent, and then all the places that I mentioned in that. So Perraneuthno is a beach, which is my favourite beach. So we take our children there now. I won't ever go down to Cornwall without visiting Perraneuthno. I described the cabin where you can get your flapjacks and coffee there. I actually went to the cabin, which is what this little cafe is called on Perraneuthno, and gave them a copy of the book and said, on page 267 you get your shout out. You shout out there. But all the beaches that I've written about in all three of those books, I know very, very well, from Gadrivi to Sennen, as I said, to Perraneuthno, to Marazion, Praesans. So everything, the beaches I do know very well. And The Storm, Alex, I don't know if you remember, but a couple of the scenes take place in some woods where she goes and meets someone down in the woods, and those woods are where my sister and I used to play when we were children. They're right next door to my grand's house in Gullville, and we used to go down the woods on our own when back in the 80s, when you could wander around on your own in the woods as two small children, and no one would care. And we would go and build camps down there and jump over the boulders in the stream. So yeah, these three Cornish books are full of my childhood memories and places that are very dear to me. Bodmin I don't know quite so well, so I am going to have to do a couple more trips before I hand that in for its final thing. But I took to it, as I said, I took to it so much that day that I spent there. And I've been there before. We've passed and we've stopped for lunch and place and things there. But so I will have to do another visit, because I don't feel quite as at home there as I do down on the in West Penwith.
How have you found doing research for locations with COVID and things? Are you doing it online or?
Yeah, so I haven't gone out too much. I went down to Cornwall between lockdowns. I had to sign some books. I went down to Padstow and to St Ives and to Penzance to sign books. And we stopped in at Blissland on Bodmin, so I visited twice actually. And we went for a long walk there, my husband and I. We were just the two of us, but yes, as soon as travel, as soon as we know what's going on in sort of January, February, March time, I will take another trip down to Bodmin and have a thing. But obviously we have to be very, you have to be very sensible. Even though we have a house down there, with my mum has a house down there, I don't want to be sort of, they're in tier 1, so I want to try and keep them in tier 1. So don't want to take any horrible tier 2, tier 3 germs down.
Yeah, complicated.
Yeah, it is a bit complicated. But now we are really lucky. It's not the same as being and soaking up the atmosphere of a place, but we are so lucky, aren't we, with the online resources that we have. Easy to get a flavour of places. So I'm doing a lot of that at the moment. Yeah.
Is there another Facebook user question you can see there?
Is so how long does it take to write your first draft? So probably this one's been a bit different because it's been very distracting with the pandemic. But average, I would probably say 3 to 4 months, bearing in mind that I've done about 10 months of notebooks, and there'll be about 8 months of editing. So I write very quickly when I'm writing. I write every day. I write with my head down. I can write anywhere between sort of 1,500 and 6,000 words a day. 6,000 words a day is a very rare occurrence. And I generally follow that with a couple of 157 words a day just to even it out. But I tend to write quite quickly. So about 3 months. And that's not as quick as some of my friends, but in my time scale, it's quite speedy. So yeah, about three months. All right, sorry, it's taken me a bit. I don't think I can. Do you feel life in Cornish communities are very different to life where you live now? Yes, hugely different. So I live in the home counties of Oxfordshire. I live near Henley-on-Thames, in between Henley, Oxford and Reading. And yeah, I mean, it is a different. I mean, I think Cornwall has its own. Well, it has its own everything. It's so unique, I think, in the country. I don't think anywhere is like Cornwall. I think they have, it's a different feel. It smells different. It looks different. It sounds different. And yeah, the rugged cliffs of West Penwith are very, very different to the very quaint riverside life that I have here. We live on the river. I've always lived by the River Thames. I grew up in a village just a little bit further down. I lived in London on the River Thames. I've never been further than 5 meters of the River Thames. So, but yeah, the River Thames is very different to Cornwall, and it's probably why I love Cornwall so much. It gives me something different to enjoy. So I'm just going to look down here. Would you ever make a graphic novel version of your books? That's a great question. God, I haven't even thought about that. Oh gosh, now I really want to. Oh, Caroline, now you've ruined it. Just before I finish my first draft, I now want to write a graphic novel. I haven't even thought about it, actually. I don't read graphic novels. I used to read a lot of comic books as a child, but I don't really read graphic novels, so I probably should start, because I have a feeling that with my love of drawing and painting, I would probably really enjoy it. So yeah, maybe I'll get my Cornish books and this contract done, and then I'll write. Oh, I could write a graphic horror novel. Do they exist? I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
All right, graphic. Yeah.
Graphic novels would lead really well with the fishing. With it being pre-COVID when you were writing it, did you ever manage to go on any research journeys with any fishermen?
No, I didn't, and I was really jealous, because one of our friends did, and I was very jealous that William Shaw went out on a boat on a trawler. I didn't even think to ask. I thought they would just laugh at me and think, who's this sort of, wet behind the ears, southern, home counties writer who wants to come and pretend she can write about our life. So I didn't even think to ask. However, I spent many happy hours legitimately sitting on the sofa watching Trawler Wars, which became my favorite thing in the whole world to watch. So I watched a lot of Trawler Wars. You asked about research earlier on. I researched a huge amount on fishing. I had books and books and books. So actually, I'll go back to that question. I researched that with very academic rigor, actually, principally because I found it so fascinating. And then I also, one of my friends who's an author, he's also used to work on a trawler boat in Iceland. And it so happened that he was a trawlerman in Penzance in the 90s. So I was like, that's incredible. So he and I had lots of chats about that, and he gave me some of the stories, and some of the stories in The Storm that sound a little bit far-fetched about their partying when they got back off the trawlers were direct from the horse's mouth. So they're not all made up. So yeah. Some of the things that he told me about were brilliant, and actually were too far out for me even to put in the book. I thought no one will believe that, so I put it in.
It's always the way, isn't it? People won't believe it with half the real stories you find out.
No, not at all. I mean, imagine if we'd written, politics over the last 4 years. Everyone would have given up after the first episode. Said this is rubbish. It would never happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Where are we? We've got lots of questions coming in thick and fast. What have your most memorable moments as an author been? Oh, that's a good question. I'm really easily pleased, so which might not come as a surprise given my overexcitement in life. But okay. So the first moment was when I'd been trying to get a book published for a long, long time. So I started writing when my child was 2.5, and my book was published in 2012. So that's 10 years it took me to sign a contract. So like I told you, we'd written this book and I couldn't get an agent, and then I did get an agent with my next book, and then we couldn't get a publisher and an editor for that book, and then we did get one for the next one. So it was a long old thing. And with In Her Wake, I'd had this awful thing, or was it In Her Wake? It must have been Sworn Secret. Anyway, I'd had this thing where an editor said, I really like your book, rewrite it like this. And so I stopped everything, I put everything aside, I wrote for 2.5 months, and I changed this book and I wrote it, and then she went, I'm not sure about that. And then I had another editor do exactly the same thing. She wrote, I really like this, I think they can work with it, can you? So I rewrote again, I wrote a couple of months, I changed it, and again it got rejected. And I think that was the worst moment of the whole thing, where I just thought, this is ridiculous. I'm trying to, they're telling me how high to jump, I'm jumping, and it's still not enough. And I was pretty much ready to give up. And then I got this phone call. I was walking my dog, I got this phone call, and my agent said, are you sitting down? And I said, no. And I sort of stood on the edge of the boot that was open. I just put my dog in, and she said, you've got a deal. And that was definitely the most memorable. And that was in 2010. So that's 10 years ago, and it still gives me goosebumps remembering that phone call. Seeing my picture, the W.H. Smith Fresh Talent, when they do that thing where they have the Fresh Talent books, like the Richard and Judy books, stacked out on the on a special stand, and they have, I had my picture with my little bio and my books lined up in all the stations, Paddington, wherever we went there. If you went into W.H. Smith, you could see me. That was pretty cool. And then the other one was something that didn't really ever come to fruition, but I signed an option on my second book, The Judas Scar, with the guys that wrote that made Sherlock. And I just thought, this is it. Stephen Moffat's going to write my script. Sue Virtue's going to direct it, and this is my life. And I'm going to definitely cast Andrew Scott in one of the roles. And but unfortunately, they couldn't find someone to make the film. But that was a lovely moment as well. So yeah, some quite good ones.
Well, given your up and down experiences, what's it been like being a mentor for? Because it says on your website that you're a mentor for young female writers.
Yeah, so I haven't. That's tailed off a little bit. I think the project's still going, but I haven't had any mentors sent through to me for a while. I had. I worked with two long term, and they both got deals. So one was Vanessa Savage, and she's now writing crime, and the other one's Catherine Miller, who writes romantic fiction. It was great. I mean, I loved it. It was they're both very talented writers, so they didn't need much input from me. I'll be honest. I can't claim any success I can't claim any part in their success, but working with them was really interesting. It was lovely to be able to, I don't know, it was lovely to feel that I had some, for want of a better word, expertise to share or pass on, and that, yeah, it's a rewarding experience. I sort of believe in turning around and pulling people up onto the raft with me. So I'm not someone who's kicking people off, and there's enough space on the bookshelves for us all, and we can all write and we can all help each other. So I think it suited me. I enjoyed it, and when they got their deals, I was really chuffed for them. It's really, really exciting. So yeah, I enjoyed that. I'm going to go down to these questions again, Alex.
Yeah, no problem.
Consider writing a book based anywhere else other than Cornwall? Yes, I would. I definitely would. I love it. It's sort of what's expected of me at the moment. For the next couple of books will be set in Cornwall, but I'd love to set I would love to set a book. Maybe this could be my graphic horror. Who knows? I would love to set a book in very snowy mountains, you know, somewhere wild and inhospitable. I'm never going to set a book, I don't think, somewhere really lush and sunny and sort of, you know, cozy. I think it's always going to be quite inhospitable. But yeah, somewhere, you know, with wolves and snow and ice and blood on the ice. Yeah, you see, I can see it already.
Yeah, I've already got my imagination's already going there.
I'm already there. It's like The Shining. Think of The Shining. That's where I want to set my book. So yes, I definitely would, and that will come eventually. For the moment, the books for the foreseeable future will be Cornish, and then I'll definitely step out soon. Yeah, right. So I'm going. We put Amanda and Alex can't see your name. No, we can't. From Lucy. What books did you read and enjoy as a child? Well, I've mentioned the Magic James Herbert. Magic Cottage is one of my all-time favourite books ever, and I don't care. I will fight people for that. I haven't even reread it, but I don't want to reread it in case I don't like it. So I'm just going to leave it as a perfect 15-year-old book. I read all of Stephen King. And I love him. So I also read Susan Cooper, The Dark is Rising sequence. If I could go back and write a book, I would write that series of books. Oh my God, it's my magic carpet book. It was the first time as a child I just felt absolutely there. I just wanted to find. I was one of those children with quite as all writers are, I think, or probably all readers, probably all children. Let's go, all children have imaginations. But I just felt that I wanted to be the seventh daughter of the seventh daughter and have magical skills foisted upon me, and I wanted to find, you know, amulets that would give me special powers, and I wanted, so Susan Cooper I read a lot of, and Dick Francis and Agatha Christie, I ate those up for dinner every day, hopefully. So yeah, it was a lot of the same old. Virginia Andrews, I loved her. So I bought those Virginia Andrews, The Flowers in the Attics books for my kids, and I was very disappointed that they were not as good as I remembered them, so I didn't like them at all. So, but again, I'm going to leave it because I can still remember some of those words that I wrote. So I read those. What books? Do you ever write a book based on your daughters and pets? So most of my books are actually based on my daughters in some way. That's possibly not quite true, but Sworn Secret, which was my first book, that came from a conversation that I had with one of my sister's friends and my sister. I have just me and my sister. We're very close. I speak to her every day, and we were close growing up. And she said to me, well, of course, when we go out to parties, if I'm with you, I'm a very different person than I am when I'm not with you. And she's my younger sister. And I was absolutely horrified by the thought that she just sort of said, well, when you're there, I'm much quieter. I listen to you more. I let you be the center stage. And I thought this was an awful thing to say, but she just said, it's just the way it is. I'm 4 years younger. It's just our sibling dynamics. And I just got thinking about that. And I thought, well, if you had that relationship and you had someone who felt that in the shadow, not in the shadow so much, but that sort of, dominating older sibling, if that older sibling was killed and taken away in your formative teenage years, how would that affect you? Would you be lost? But then I just had my second daughter, or my third daughter. I can't remember when I wrote it now, probably my third daughter. And I couldn't think about a dying sister without reflecting that back onto my children. And I wrote, one of the threads was the mother who had lost her daughter, and it was really hard to write, and there was a lot of my feelings as a mother in there, and it's probably the only time that I write where I was actually moved to tears a couple of times. It wasn't because of my words, it was because of what I was thinking about and imagining. So I do read, I do put all my, I will never write anything like word for word that's from my life, but all my emotions are put into my books. Every scene that's in a book that has any emotion attached to it will relate in some way to something that I've experienced or the empathy that I feel about that. So the pets as well. So I made a massive error with the Judas scar, and I'll never do this. Well, I won't say never, but I killed a pet. I killed an animal, and oh my goodness, I got into. There's so many people upset. I got like not angry with me, but just like, oh no, I can't believe you did that. Like really, like while they were live tweeting me or something, they'd be like, oh my god, I just got to that bit. And I still remember the scene. It's a very powerful scene, and it's there for a reason. But oh my dear, oh my days. So I won't ever. Well, I wouldn't want to say that. I put a couple of pets in jeopardy, haven't I? I wouldn't want to give the game away. But yeah, I do put pets in, and this Bodmin Moor one is absolutely jam-packed full of animals. It's I've got ponies and goats and dogs. It's part of the story is set in a commune in the early 2000s, where they all go and they try to do some subsistence and self-sufficient living, and so they have animals there. And on Bodmin Moor, there's a lot of ponies and sheep and hawks and stuff. So this next book I'm writing at the moment is jam-packed full of animals, and I don't know whether I'll have to edit it out because it really is a love story to animals, which, you know, but maybe that'll make it. Maybe people will respond to that. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see what my editor and agent think when they read it. They might say, "Hey, get rid of the goats." Right, where are we? I am right-handed. Is that my right hand? Yes, I'm definitely right-handed. I can't do anything with my left hand. My middle daughter is left-handed, and is very typically left-handed. So, but no, I'm very boring. Right-handed. Don't have any fun quirks about me at all. I'm very boring, really. So yes, right-handed. And what are your favourite biscuits? All biscuits, of course. I love all biscuits. What are my favourites? If you were going to say what would you like now, I would probably say, this is very different. Child Amanda is not happy with this answer, but adult Amanda would probably say a dark chocolate digestive right now. Is that weird? A bit weird. Maybe custard cream. Maybe custard cream. Or hairdresser biscuits. I like hairdresser biscuits. Lotus biscuits. Those are nice. Any biscuit. I mean, basically, I'm a biscuit tart. Any biscuits. Just not fussy. Oh dear. Facebook user, I've always wanted a goat. So have I. So we have a goat story, which is I said to we were talking with my youngest daughter when she was about. So we have chickens, we had rabbits at this time. We have dog, 2 cats, a couple of ponies as well. It's a very iconic life that we live. And I said to my daughter, I would really like a goat, and I've even written this in the book. I want to build it a climbing frame that I can see them hop and skip all the way over their climbing frame. So my youngest daughter, who must have been about 7, said to me, I would really like a goat too, Mommy. And I said, fine, well, we need to go and talk to your dad. So we went over to talk to my husband, and we said, look, we would really like to get a goat. Is there any chance that we could just make a little corner of the field and get a goat? And he said, in terms of animals, it's 1 out, 1 in, one species out, one. So I went to talk to my daughter, and I said, he's not having it. I said, he's one in, 1 out, and she just said, do you think we could get rid of Daddy? And I was like, look, I would, but I'm not sure he's going to stand for that. So it's a very sweet moment where she was sort of like, you know, that, I don't know if you remember the advert that was where the little girl's going, Daddy or chips, and she chooses chips. Well, that was my daughter with the goat.
Yeah, that's a great funny thing to end on. As we've got 2 minutes, is there a short question in there? Yeah.
I think I've got them all. So Sam, have I got them all? Yeah, I think I've got them all. So I'll go down, and after this, I'll go back onto the page, and I'll just choose the ones that I enjoyed answering the most, and then send them. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's cool.
Or yeah, rather than I want to. Yeah, and as I said, there's 3 of them, so I'll pick 3. But there you go. Thank you ever so much, Alex. I've really enjoyed that.
No problem. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really fun.
Good. Well, anytime you want me back to rabbit on.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Since you've become you're a member of the group, is there anything you're reading at the moment that you can tell people?
I've just read, it's not out yet, but I've just read the next in Geetha Lodge's procedural series, which lie beside me, which is really good. Fantastic opening and sort of lots and lots of twists and turns. So if you like your police procedurals with lots of twists and turns, if you like your fiction dark, and I'm talking very, very dark, I'm sure you won't have missed the buzz surrounding Will Dean's next Last Thing to Burn. Very dark, difficult to read in places, but brilliant and very memorable read. So those are two that I would definitely recommend.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and let's see you again in the group in the near future, chatting with people. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me, and lovely to have all your lovely questions. Thank you.